Massive protests across the United States of America, across universities there. I'm being joined by a student from Yale University, Chisato Kimura. Thank you so much, Chisato, for joining us here on India Today Global. Beginning with the entire encampments, protests and the crackdown, could you first provide us an update on what's happening there and what's the current situation at Yale?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. The situation right now at Yale is that we have continued to protest against the genocide in Gaza, against Yale University's role in the genocide in Gaza, and we have continually been repressed by the university. So several weeks ago, we set up an encampment with tents, and a few days after we set up the encampments, the university sent in about 50 to 60 armed police officers to sweep the camp and get rid of the encampment. And they ended up arresting nearly 50 students and community members. And it was quite upsetting and horrifying to see the university respond to very reasonable calls for an end to complicity and genocide with that kind of violence and that kind of militancy. However, we continue to protest because Yale continues to be complicit in and Yale continues to profit off of the genocide in Gaza. And we set up another encampment on a different part of the campus. And several days after we did that, the university sent in this time over 100 cops to sweep the encampment completely, surrounded, and they sent in police officers at 6 in the morning when people were still sleeping in tents. And it was very disorienting, quite frightening for a lot of us. And they swept the encampment again. And we continue to protest because even if they're continuing to destroy our encampments, the fact remains that Yale continues to profit off of the genocide in Gaza. And at the point that over 40,000 people have been killed, every single university in Gaza has been destroyed. Millions of people have been displaced. We have to keep organizing. We have to keep going. And most recently, as we were holding a peaceful rally, peaceful protest, the police officers, Yale Police Department, because Yale, of course, has a private police force, they violently attacked our protesters, broke someone's nose, caused injuries among protesters, and violently arrested several protesters, despite giving no warning, and despite no indication that we were doing anything wrong. So, the university is responding to peaceful protests against genocide quite aggressively and violently, as are the police.
Well, we've heard about the protests at Yale, and we've also seen the widespread condemnation of the crackdown. But then there are demands that have been made by the students, and many do not really understand what that divestment demand really is. So for the benefit of our viewers and people across the world, just tell us what is the underlying purpose of this entire protest, and what are your demands specifically with regards to divestment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think generally we are mobilizing and we are protesting for free Palestine and for an end to the genocide in Gaza. But specifically, we're protesting within our university settings because we realize that our universities are complicit and are playing a role in the genocide. So specifically for Yale, we know that Yale has part of its $40 billion endowment invested in weapons manufacturing, companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Boeing. And those companies are directly supplying the weapons, the bombs the planes that are being dropped on Palestinians in Gaza. And so our demands are threefold. First, we want Yale to disclose all of its investments because right now there's no transparency into where our endowment, where our money is going, which is quite a problem for, the many students, the community members who are paying tuition, who are working for the school. We have no transparency. We have no idea where our tuition dollars or where our labor is going in terms of investments. And so that's the first component. We are demanding that Yale disclose its investments so that we know exactly where Yale is putting its money, where Yale is putting its investments. And then the second demand is for divestment from weapons manufacturing, because we believe that educational institutions have absolutely no business investing in weapons manufacturing, in bombs and weapons, in the tools that are used to kill tens of thousands of people around the world. And right now we're focused on the genocide in Gaza, but on a broader scale, universities have no business
Right.
investing in and profiting off of bombs being dropped on children, on fathers, on mothers. So that's the second component. And then the third component is when we're asked the question, so if Yale divests, where does it put its money? We want Yale to reinvest in the local community of New Haven because we know that Yale has taken so much in terms of resources and land, money from its local community, New Haven. And we want Yale to reinvest in education, in affordable housing, in food security. And at the end of the day, those are our demands. But at the core of it, it's that we recognize that there's a grave social injury happening in Gaza. We recognize that there's been over 75 years of grave social injury happening in Palestine. And that's why we're out here protesting.
Well, many universities, Chisato, refrain from associating themselves with tobacco and alcohol companies, but they continue to invest in weapons manufacturers. Now, is that not a contradiction in itself, doublespeak by the universities? We know that many universities have refused to divest, particularly Columbia, including Yale, but also that they're not being transparent about the divestment.
Absolutely. And Yale has also said that they're not going to divest. And I think Yale is a particularly interesting case because Yale University actually divested from assault weapons after seeing gun violence in the United States and mass shootings in the United States. They determined that assault weapons were what they considered grave social injury and that they had to divest from assault weapons manufacturing. And that's good. I'm glad that they have divested from that, and I'm glad that they are committed and understand that weapons used to kill children in schools should be divested from. I absolutely agree. But absolutely, this double speak, as you mentioned, is present in the fact that the Yale University can see that when there are weapons killing children, killing masses of people in the United States, those industries need to be divested from. However, what Yale University is saying is that when there are weapons killing massive amounts of people in Palestine, mothers, fathers, children, brothers, sisters, that's fine, that they don't care about Palestinian children. It's quite frankly Islamophobic, it's racist. It's absolutely horrifying because what Yale is signaling through their choices and what they divest from is that they care about children, they care about people's lives in the United States, but they don't care about people in Palestine. And that's horrific. These are the kinds of things that we're trying to expose and shed light on as we continue to protest.
Well, that's a very important point you make, Chisato. But then again, these are positions have been taken on both sides. We do believe that the students over here have taken a very strong position and they're demanding what they think is right for Palestine and for those who are aggrieved, the aggrieved party. But so have the universities. Now, is there room for compromise? Is there room to address the concerns, yet ensure that the protest ends?
I think the core of that question is, what side of history are you on? Are you on the side of genocide and supporting and profiting off of genocide, or are you going to be doing everything you can to stop that genocide? And unless we're stopping unless we're stopping the investments in weapons manufacturing, unless the United States stops sending weapons, unless we are all doing everything possible to end the violence in Gaza, you're going to be on the wrong side of history. And I don't see, that when the choices are genocide or ending a genocide, I don't think there is a middle ground there, because I think we should all be able to collectively say there shouldn't be two sides to this. It shouldn't be a debate. There shouldn't be two sides to this, where one side is actively supporting a genocide and that is somehow okay, and then the other side is doing everything it can to stop the genocide. There's only one way to proceed, which is to end the genocide.
Chisato, what is important over here is to understand one thing. Now, those who are against the protests have labeled student protesters or protesters across the United States of America as anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic. Now, how do you respond to these accusations in light of the political statements such as the ones made by Donald Trump, by Biden also, but particularly Trump, where he says that should he come to power, he will not just end the protests, he's actually called protesters, extremists, and that they will have to leave the country?
I mean, I would say it's not just Trump. Biden has said very, very similar things. It seems that all leaders in our government, or most of our government leaders, including Joe Biden, including Donald Trump, are absolutely on the wrong side of history. It doesn't, at this point, the way I see it, it's not an issue of party, whether Democrat or Republican, both parties are supporting this genocide. And so, what I see is governmental elite against the people, because the masses of people, a large majority of people in the United States want to see a ceasefire, want to see the United States stop ending its support of the genocide. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, what I see is a government that's failing to respond to what the people are saying.
In all this, do you really see the society in the United States of America divided? We know that there is division within the universities, students, the government, the state, and the students as well. But in terms of the society itself within the United States of America, do you see a division there with differing views on the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, when you look at the polls and you look at the data, it's very clear that over 2/3 of the United States actually also supports a ceasefire, supports ending US complicity in the genocide in Gaza. And so I don't think the people are as divided as it is sometimes characterized. And it's absolutely true that the vast majority of people in the United States, around the world, recognize what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Palestine, what's been happening for decades, and see that it is completely wrong and that there needs to be an end to it. And I think that's ultimately, what it comes down to, in terms of seeing the state response. Various bills have been proposed that are threatening to kick people out of the country, put people on no-fly zones, or even there was a bill introduced in Congress to even send protesters to Gaza. And all of these things are, first of all, just distractions from what's happening on the ground in Palestine. But also at the end of the day, when you compare the kinds of disciplinary actions or legal actions that protesters are facing versus what's happening in Palestine, I mean, there's no question about it. We have to keep going. There is nothing that should be or will stop us from continuing to mobilize to end the genocide. Because especially as students, when we're being threatened with suspension or arrest or academic probation, all of these different things, I mean, the fact of the matter is that all of the universities in Gaza have been destroyed. Tens of thousands of people have been killed and millions displaced. People don't have schools to study in anymore. It's just almost, I would say it's disrespectful to even think that the consequences that we could face for protesting against a genocide are in any way comparable to or a deterrent from us mobilizing against a genocide.
And finally, Chisato, before I let you go, this is a very important question. Being in the United States of America, having seen the stands and positions that US has taken in the past, today, after the crackdown, this whole claim of being the land of the free, talking about freedom of speech, of assembly, of opinion, can the United States of America now hold other countries accountable? Do they have the higher moral ground to really talk about other countries and their actions in various parts of the world when right now they themselves do not look like a country that is tolerant?
I mean, at the end of the day, the United States is an imperial country. It's an empire. It has been since its conception. And the genocide in Gaza is just the latest iteration of violence that it is complicit in and supports and unleashes on particularly marginalized communities around the world. And I think what the United States first needs to do is look internally and really listen to the people and what they are saying, especially in the context of what's happening in Palestine. Americans realize that it's absolutely disgusting. It is terrible, and it is something that taxpayers should not and do not want to be complicit in. And so I think what America needs to do first is to look internally and reassess, stop funding the genocide in Gaza, stop funding the decades of occupation that Palestine has endured, and to fully back a liberated Palestine, to fully support the equality and freedom and liberation of all oppressed peoples.
Chisato Kimura, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global.
Thank you for having me.